My name is Rona Buckhalter, and I'm the Director of Drexel Fellowships Office, and we're going to be talking in this presentation about the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. Fulbright is the oldest and largest student and scholar exchange program. It was created in the 40s by Congress, and it's actually a program of the State Department, more specifically of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So this is important to know because its goal is to increase mutual understanding between the U.S. and the host countries that it partners with. In other words, it may fund your research, it may fund an exchange, but it does so with the goal of really citizen diplomacy, of understanding between peoples. So there are lots of different Fulbright programs. It's a very large program. They fund scholar, faculty, professional exchanges. They also fund student exchanges.
Being around people from different backgrounds, from a scientific standpoint, it introduces you to different perspectives and outlooks. So in the scientific realm, I think it will really help how I look at things, but also from a cultural standpoint, I'm excited to see how, I guess, Swiss live for a longer term period and also enjoy some of their chocolate and cheese.
I hope that this starts like a long-lasting collaboration so that when I'm a professor, I can host Portuguese students in my lab and I can send my students to Portugal and just keep the international experience going.
Being in Bulgaria for a year has done wonders for my self-confidence. I was terrified to go, obviously. I think everybody goes through that. Everybody even has that moment where they say, well, theoretically, you could say no to a Fulbright. And everything was an adventure in the beginning. Every single thing that you do, you want to get tomatoes across the street, you sort of panic briefly. But then at the end of it, you realize that you've really adapted to this culture, and it's frightening to go back to your own culture with all of the stuff you've learned that you think might be completely not applicable to your new life, but it is, because just sitting in Philadelphia, surrounded by people, my interactions have become, it's like if you can do something in a country where you barely know the language and you don't know anything about the cultural expectations, if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
And there's really two types of grants. There is the traditional Fulbright, which is the research study grant, and this funds you basically for one academic year to go overseas on really a self-designed project. It might be a research project, it might be a study project where you're getting a master's degree, it might be some community engagement. It's often some combination of those things. There's also a newer, younger program called the English Teaching Assistantship, and this is quickly growing. And in this one, known as the ETA, grantees are placed in an English language classroom, and you're there really as an English-speaking, native English speaker in that classroom, often to help with conversation or to help in teaching about American culture. And you apply to a country for that, but you're placed within a specific school. There is also, if you're applying to one of these countries listed here that speak one of the State Department designated critical languages, you can apply for what's known as the CLIA Award, Critical Language Enhancement Award, for additional months of study of that critical language. There are also a few specific awards that we're not going to talk about here. There's one that's co-sponsored with MTVU, and that is to look at music as a sort of global force for expression. And the other is a brand new award this year called, it's a public policy fellowship. Okay, basic benefits. Fulbright, if you get the grant, they cover your airfare. They give you a stipend based on the cost of living of the country that you're going to. Very basic insurance. And then it's all a little country specific. Some of the host country Fulbright commissions are very generous and very proactive, and they might set up conferences for grantees in their country, or organize social events or opportunities for you to meet some leaders in the country, but that really, or travel opportunities, but that's really very country specific. Okay, students who are in early stages of applying for a Fulbright grant often wonder what they can actually do on a Fulbright and have a hard time understanding what it means to design a project. So what we're going to do is just run you through fairly quickly what some Drexel students have done on Fulbrights in recent years. And I've organized these by fields of study so that you can jump to the part that's relevant for you. So some engineering students. Aaron Sakalich was a BS PhD in materials engineering here at Drexel, and he went to Morocco where he proposed to study alternatives to Portland cement, looking for more environmental alternatives. Regina Cagle was environmental engineering, and she was very involved at Drexel with the Engineers Without Borders group. So for her Fulbright, she got a master's degree in sustainable energy from the university in Quito, and she also worked on the community level with Engineers Without Borders and community responses to sustainable energy initiatives. Karen Miller was a BS-MS in architectural engineering with a master's in science, technology, and society, and she went to Turkey for her Fulbright, where she actually didn't do what it says here. She actually worked on the preservation of the old historic houses in Istanbul and worked with community groups on kind of understanding the value of preserving those homes. Kara Spiller was a biomedical engineering BS PhD, and she was a Fulbright scholar to Portugal, where she worked in a lab on scaffolds for tissue engineering. And Kara also wound up playing on the local volleyball team where she tore her Achilles tendon. Some Drexel projects, student projects in biology and medicine. Paul Phelps was a medical student who went to India, and he had a lab project looking at epithelial stem cells in the cornea, but he was also interested in how they provide eye care to people in India, and he was very interested in working in the eye hospital in Madurai, doing some community work. Andrew Blakely was in biomedical engineering and then in Drexel's medical school, and he went to Spain and looked at how primary care doctors are handling obesity, which is a relatively new issue in Spain, and he used survey methods. Jan Singaravelu is a medical sciences master's student, and she is in India looking at HIV and TB co-infection and looking at particular markers, working with a hospital down there of adherence to treatment. Karen Sullum is an environmental sciences PhD student, and she is at a lab in Switzerland looking at the bacteria in fish guts, and you'll hear more from her later in the presentation. In humanities and business fields, Amanda MacArthur was an English teaching assistant to Bulgaria. Kent Troutman was a Fulbright scholar in China, where he looked at the structure of interest rates and microfinance in rural Sichuan province. Dan Tedesco was also a Fulbright scholar to China, where he was looking at the Student Village Officials program and how they develop youth leadership. Caitlin Costello was a Fulbright scholar to Senegal, and she was looking at methods for rice production in Senegal, and also so both farming and marketing strategies for domestic rice production. And these are the 2012 Fulbright finalists. We'll be hearing about these folks any day. On the eligibility side, you must be a U.S. citizen. You must have at least a bachelor's degree by the time the grant starts, but you may not yet have a doctorate in your hand. So that means you can apply as early as fall of your senior year as a graduate student, and anytime thereafter until you actually have a doctorate in your hand, if you ever do. Some questions. You do not have to be enrolled as a student to apply for the U.S. student grant. You can apply as an alum. The fellowships office is happy to work with you unless you are enrolled in a different school at the time of application. There is no age limit. And then there's language proficiency. So that's really going to vary quite a bit by host country, as well as the project that you propose. Fulbright's basic take on language is that you need to have enough language ability to do the project that you propose to do in the place where you propose to do it. So that is to say, if you're proposing to work in a scientific lab in a country in Western Europe and the language of the lab is English, as the language of many labs are, you might not need very much of the host language. But if you're going to propose to do, say, ethnographic research in a rural area, you might need to be quite fluent. So it really depends on what the project is that you're proposing and whether you have the skills to do that project well. Beyond that, if you remember that this is a State Department program, Fulbright really on the U.S. side would like to see every grantee have at least what they call a hospitality level of the language of the host country by the time you go away on your award. So that is, if you don't need to have it today, but you need to have a legitimate and realistic plan to get at least some basic conversation skills by the time you go. Enough to get around, to have casual conversations with people in the market, just to be able to connect with people in an authentic way in the host country. Okay, let's talk about the actual application for the Fulbright. There's an online application that asks for some basic data about you, your home address, your email, your educational history, your work history, travel experiences, etc. And then there's 2 essays. There's a statement of grant purpose if you're applying for the research study grant. That is a maximum of 2 pages, single-spaced. For the English teaching assistantship, that's a 1-page statement. So it's that plus a 1-page personal statement. If you have any language ability whatsoever in the host country, you're going to want to get a language evaluation. You're going to need 3 letters of references in all cases. If you're applying for the English teaching assistantship, you should note that that's a form letter that gets filled out online. Otherwise, they're standard letters of reference. You'll need transcripts. For the fall application, an unofficial transcript is absolutely fine. And if you are a finalist, then they'll want to see an official transcript. And the fellowships office can get that for you without a problem. And that's it. If you're applying for the research study grant, you will need a letter of affiliation. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in just a second. If you're applying in creative arts, there is an opportunity for you to submit supplementary materials.
Definitely the essays. It took forever. I just, wrote and rewrote and just edited a million times. I sent them to past Fulbrighters. I sent them to you at the fellowships office. I sent them to friends, family, like anybody I could think of who might be able to give me some advice. So they took a lot of time.
I'll never forget I think I wrote my personal statement first, and my parents are writers, and so my dad usually, he's great to give things off to because they're not scientists, so, do these things make sense to you? But I actually sent him my personal statement first, and to see if it was good, and he responded to me. He said, "I thought you could write better than this." And that was my first draft. So it needed a lot of work. I had friends read it, I had family members read it, at the fellowship office read it, and different people will point out different things, and some opinions conflict, but every person has a different opinion, as will the people who read it on the other end. So it's really helpful to get a multitude of different opinions and then use your own judgment of how you want to incorporate those changes or not. But if someone misreads something that you're saying or misinterprets it a way that you might want it to be interpreted, that's possible that someone further down the line might read it a certain way. So it's good to get perspectives of many different people.
It was really just these two essays. The one's only 1 page and the other's 2 pages, and so I wrote them both in one day and was like, all right, I'm done. I thought that was easy. And I sent them to my sisters, who are my editors, and they tactfully told me that they were terrible, and so I started from scratch and rewrote them, sent them to other people, friends and family, and I ended up having to continuously rewrite them. I didn't just edit them, I rewrote the essays. I think by the time I submitted it, there was 9 different versions that I had written, and so I just spent so much time, and every time I think the essays got better and better. And by the end, I really think it was the best essay I could have written. I don't think it could have gotten any better. And I think that's the key, is that you just have to put a ton of time into it. And if you do, then it'll be perfect.
A letter of affiliation is somebody in that host country who will be your supervisor, your mentor, your advisor, who will be your host, your contact person in that country. Often these are professors at universities, directors of labs, but it doesn't have to be. It can be an NGO, it can be a nonprofit, it can be lots of different things. You just want to be sure to read those individual country descriptions to make sure that you're following whatever requirements or parameters that host country has put on them. And it is worth reiterating here that if you are applying for the English teaching assistantship, you do not secure an affiliation. You apply to a country, and that country places you within that at a particular school in that country. The timeline. This is always a big one for Fulbright. It is a very long application process. So if you're interested in applying for Fulbright, spring is an excellent time to get serious about that. Start looking around, doing your research, designing your project, drafting your statements, talking to people, and you would work on that through the spring and summer. Our campus deadline for 2012, or that is for the Fulbright 13-14 year, is September 10th. It's usually in early September at Drexel. And the fellowship's office is absolutely happy to work with you and would like you to work with you leading up to that deadline, so that what you submit is really as good as you can make it. After that, we convene a campus committee, and that committee will interview you and read your materials and hopefully give you lots of good feedback to help you improve your application. That committee also gives Fulbright feedback on your application and on your candidacy. That all goes on. Then you'll have probably somewhere around a month to work on revising your application. The national deadline is usually the 2nd or 3rd week of October. And then Fulbright convenes national screening committees, and these are committees composed of U.S. academics with expertise in the country that you're applying to. Those national screening committees select the finalists. It's usually around 1.5 to 2 times the number of grants that the host country has to give. You find out about that in late January, so already a long period of time. And then if you are a finalist, there's nothing more for you to do but to continue to wait. The applications of the finalists then are reviewed by the host country, and that host country selects among the finalists who they would like to give the grants to. And you find out sometime, usually in April or May. It's usually early April, mid-April. Okay, perhaps one of the most challenging parts of putting together a Fulbright application is figuring out what you want to do and where you want to do it. And of course, it's the fun part, but it's hard. So what we're going to do is just walk you through some possible ways that you might help start to answer that question and figure it out. And we'll also let you hear from some students who can talk to you about how they did it.
I had two different interests in here at Drexel, and one was my financial interests and my economic interests. So I had a finance and economics concentrations, but also I had minored in Mandarin, and I had been to China, and so I kind of wanted to find a way to pull these two interests together, and that's not always possible if you go directly into the financial industry. So I decided I'd heard about the Fulbright Scholarship, and I had read a few books about my topic, which is microfinance. And so I decided, hey, this seems like a great way to pull these two interests together. So I decided to go to China, or to apply to go to China, and study the financial institutions in the developing country in China. And so using my experience and from both classes and from my work experience to kind of help me research these things in China, and then also pull in my interest in the Chinese market and the Chinese culture and people.
So I chose Senegal because I studied abroad there about 2 years ago for a year, and I was really interested in going back and doing research there in rice farming, which was a big issue in the country because they import a lot of rice. And they eat a lot of rice, but they don't produce very much. So it was a topic that I've been really interested in, and I was kind of interested in going and doing research there. And Senegal is one of the most food import-dependent countries in sub-Saharan Africa, so it seemed like a really good place to start doing research on food security.
I kind of picked Portugal just because I met the director of the lab there at a conference, and he was really passionate about international education and basically gave a presentation to this room saying, I love hosting students from other countries, so send me your students.
If you are applying, you're going to spend an awful lot of time on the Fulbright U.S. student website. So the address is us.fulbrightonline.org. And this is what you'll see when you go to that site. If it doesn't look like this page, then you're on the wrong site. us.fulbrightonline.org. And there's a few things to show you. One is you'll see some information about campus events here. And you're really going to navigate through this left-hand set of links. The first thing I want to show you is where you're going to spend an awful lot of time to start with, and that is the country summaries page. So here you'll find the individual summaries of the individual countries and regions where you might go. So let's just take, for example, East Asia Pacific. There's a few things here. You'll see that it tells you who the program manager is for that region. It'll tell you any particularities about the region as a whole. You can see a summary here of the region in which it'll summarize where the grants go within that region, and how many applications they give, and any other relevant details. But here on the right, you'll find the individual country summaries. And this is really where you want to spend a lot of time. Here you'll see the specifics of that host country's program. So we're on China as an example. China requires strong Mandarin. Right? Whatever that host country's requirements are, you're going to have to align with. Tells you any other particularities about what kind of candidates they're looking for, what fields of study they are or are not interested in, any other particularities, as well as the websites for if there's a Fulbright commission in the host country, they'll tell you that. Also, these videos over on the right can be very useful. Sometimes these are previous grantees talking about their experience in that host country. Sometimes they are staff who work in the Fulbright Commission in the host country. So those are definitely also worth taking a look at. So what you'll wind up doing is looking at a whole lot of these country descriptions, and you're really looking for a match between what your interests are and what that host country is interested in funding. Right, so again, you're seeing the particularities of that host country's program and what their preferences are or what their restrictions are. Another good place to look for as you're trying to figure this out is to go to that previous grantee directory. And I mentioned this already, but that's here under Resources for Applicants. And here you can search by year, by host country, by field of study to find out what kinds of projects Fulbright has funded in a particular country or in a particular field. You'll also see here under Resources for Applicants the competition statistics. Now, this gets a little dicey because you don't want to decide where to go, certainly based on how competitive a country is, but you should know whether the country that you're applying for is extremely competitive, like the United Kingdom, which had 611 applications for 32 awards, or a country that is less competitive, say Luxembourg, which only last year had 3 applications for 2 grants. So you can see, going through these competition statistics, that it really varies widely, and it makes sense to go in with your eyes open. As you start to take the process seriously of deciding where you want to go, what you want to do, you're going to start thinking more concretely about an affiliation. Who is it that could help you do the project that you're proposing to do, who's in country? So you're going to go to conferences, you're going to talk to people, you're going to talk to your faculty advisors, but I also want to encourage you to think of Drexel as a resource more broadly in that process. An excellent place to do that is to start with the Office of International Programs. Their web address is drexel.edu/international. This is their homepage. There's 2 things in particular that I want to point out to you here. One is partnerships and exchanges. So the institution has a number of partnerships and exchanges and other kinds of agreements with different institutions, and it's worthwhile for you to know where those partnerships are and where those agreements are. So you can scroll through this list and see if we have any institutional relationships and places where you might be thinking of going. And if so, I would encourage you to reach out to the Office of International Programs directly and find out what the best way is to connect with that institution or organization. Sometimes we might have a faculty member who really is the best point of contact, but the Office of International Programs would be able to tell you that. The other thing I'd like to point out to you is the GRAND database, and you'll see this link over here on the top right that says GRAND. This is the Global Research and Academic Network at Drexel. So this is very cool because it lists for you, it's a database of our faculty around the university who have international expertise, experience, collaborators in various countries. So let's say that you want to know, where do we have relationships in Finland, let's say, and search the records, and you'll come up with a few faculty members, and these details will tell you what the nature is of that experience. And just because the person might not be in your college or might not be in your field doesn't mean that you can't reach out to him or her and say that you're a Drexel student in XYZ program and you're working with the fellowships office on a Fulbright application, and you see that this particular professor has experience in Finland or in Poland, and this is a place where you might be interested in going. You'll be surprised at how many of our faculty members, especially those who have listed themselves here in the database, will be open to having those conversations. And sometimes they'll be willing to sit down with you and help you think about what kind of a project might make sense in that host country. Sometimes they might even, in some cases, know somebody who would be interesting and worthwhile for you to know. They might be willing to broker an introduction or something like that. It certainly is worth asking.
What's really exciting to me about putting together a Fulbright application is that it's an opportunity for you to ask yourself, to think about, to research who is doing the coolest work anywhere on the planet in an area that interests you. So a good way to do that, one way is to go to conferences, to meet people, to talk to people, to look at the articles that you might be reading already for classes and research papers, to see what institutions people are affiliated with. A somewhat more methodical approach is to use our library databases. And there's one particular database that I'd like to show you. This is from Haggerty Library website. The web address is library.drexel.edu/databases/funding. And there is one here which is incredibly useful, called the Community of Science Scholar Universe. You click on that button, it'll take you to this page. This is the Community of Science Scholar Universe database. Whenever you see this advanced search option, you always want to take it. So what this database will do is allow you to search by whatever your key terms are for what you're interested in. And here's what's really exciting, is this section here. You can select what countries you're interested in. So you're saying, I would like to find people who are working in those areas in these particular countries. It's very cool. And what that'll do is bring up people with various kinds of affiliations in those places. And of course, you're going to have to go through and see who they are and what they do, but this might be a way for you to connect with somebody in particular. So the Community of Science Scholar Universe can be an extraordinarily helpful place to find possible affiliations. So there's one more place that I can suggest that you use as a resource as you are researching your Fulbright and where you might go and who you might work with. That is the Fulbright Scholar Program. This is not to be confused with the Fulbright Student Program, which is what we've been talking about. This is the part of Fulbright that sends scholars and professionals overseas, and this can be accessed here at www.cies.org. That's the Council for International Exchange of Scholars. And this is what this page looks like. Again, this is almost entirely for scholars and professionals, but you're going to be interested in this link here that says Fulbright Scholar List. When you click that, it takes you, here we go, to the list of both U.S. scholars that have been overseas and visiting scholars who have come to the U.S. So, for example, if we click on this to find out folks who have been in the U.S. this year, what it brings up is an Excel spreadsheet. And this tells you the names of the scholars, what institutions and hometowns they're from, what countries, what fields of study, as well as where they were hosted, the institution where they were hosted, and the name of the faculty member who hosted them. So this is useful to know because It might be somebody that you can contact in the country that you're interested in, or there might be somebody locally in Philadelphia who you know has an interest or who perhaps has hosted a scholar from a country that interests you. You can also look conversely at the U.S. scholar list to find folks who have gone to a particular country. And you can say, let's say you're looking at Denmark, and you want to find out who are the U.S. scholars that have been to Denmark in recent years. And then you can click and find out a little bit more about what they've done and what their home institutions are. And you might even go ahead and contact them and see if they have any ideas about who you might contact in the host country, what kinds of projects are interesting to do in that host country. So what you'll find is people who have been Fulbright grant recipients tend to be very enthusiastic about that experience and very willing to help people, even if you're not necessarily a student, even from their own home institution. At this point, you may be starting to wonder who we are at the Fellowships Office and what we do and what role we play in helping you through the application process. Part of what we do is outreach and education across Drexel with students, faculty, staff, education, helping people understand the programs. We really provide guidance for you as an applicant all the way through the application process, from initial understanding through completed applications. We arrange those campus committees to interview you. We can provide sample essays for you from prior students who have been successful, so you can see some models. And if you do end up getting the award, we work with University Communications to help make sure that we get a little bit of coverage for you. If you've made it this far into the video, it seems likely that you're seriously interested in applying for Fulbright. This is the contact information for us at the Drexel Fellowships Office. Feel free to get in touch, let us know, set up a time. We strongly encourage you to come on in and talk with us about your ideas, about your plans. Our best advice overall for you in putting the application together is to keep a few key words in mind: compelling, feasible, and coherent. So your project should be compelling, it should be exciting, it should be engaging, it should make people want to hear more about it. It should be feasible, it should be doable by you with the education, experience, resources, language ability that you have. It should be a project that is feasible for you to do in one academic year. And your application should be coherent. All the pieces should hang together so that it really makes sense why you should do this project in this country at this time. And we will leave you with a few words of advice from a couple of our student applicants. Good luck.
Be honest in the essays. Mm-hmm. I think if you honestly are enthusiastic to go, then that'll come out instead of trying to write what you think they want to hear.
I would say just do your homework. When you're applying to the Fulbright, just research what you're applying to, research the country, cover all your bases, those 3 bases with language, the idea, and the cultural exchange. I think if you can address all of those and have a good idea, then you should get it.